Hey everyone, Kevin Raylick here with sort of a retro deck look. This is an old deck of the Texan number 45 playing cards. These are still sealed. We're going to crack these open. This is a blue seal version, so still made in Cincinnati rather than when the U.S. Playing Card Company had moved to Erlanger, Kentucky. The Texan 45s, these are the Palmetto back style, so totally blank bottom here other than Texan 45 Poker. But these have a really long history, according to the Hockman Encyclopedia, which if you're a card collector I would highly recommend having that in your library as a resource. The first Texan 45s were introduced in 1889 by Russell and Morgan. And then later on, when the International Playing Card Company was formed in 1914, these became a Canadian brand. They were discontinued as a brand in the US somewhere in the 1920s. And they continued to be produced throughout the 20th century, but as you can see on the seal here, International Playing Card Co. Limited. And so these were printed in Cincinnati by USPC, but under the brand of International Playing Card Company, exclusively for the Canadian market. And so that's why you see on here the English and French. So here we have air cushion finish, and then I don't speak French, and I'm not going to try and insult those who do by mangling the pronunciation of their language, but you can see here, manufactured in USA for International Playing Card Company Limited, Markham, Ontario, Canada. This does have a barcode on the back of the tuck rather than on the bottom panel. And this does have the registered trademark symbol after Texan, next to the ace of spades, after Texan on the bottom flap, next to the spade and the brand here. So we're going to crack this open, but my guess is that this comes from a date in the 90s, but let's find out. So as I mentioned, these continued to run for a while. As far as I know, the last run of these was done in 2010. I have seen ones dated on the tuck box for 2010. Those have a black seal that just says U.S. Playing Card Company, the standard black seal that we're all familiar with. Well, we'll go ahead and just totally get rid of the cellophane. Why not? It's so much easier to see everything clearly if that is some very well well-secured cellophane, I tell you what. Come on, there we go, there we go. Static electricity, perfect. Okay, so these are in red. These were made in both red and blue. I actually asked USPC about the potential of producing a custom print run of these a few years ago. And I was told that they were available exclusively for the Canadian market, and that wasn't possible. They weren't sure, they weren't able to tell me at that time whether or not there might be any reprints that might happen down the line. So as far as I know, the last run of these was printed in 2010. They may or may not ever be printed again. I would hope that it's something that at some point they do a new print run and keep this design alive due to its long history. It was in production for like over 120 years. But who knows? So let's go ahead and break through the seal here and see what we have inside. So we have a small flap. We claim exclusive trademark rights, and then the same disclaimer in French. And so we have got common to have some little fragments in there. So when this brand was first advertised by Russell and Morgan, they called it an unenameled card. This was something that they produced kind of as an alternative to steamboats and other things that did have an enameled finish. So obviously these are going to be different. These were produced using modern printing presses and techniques, so these aren't going to feel the same as ones from the late 1800s. But this is the back design. We got a little six-pointed star, sort of a little wreath of leaves in there, and then where this gets its name, palmetto back or palmettos, are all these palm leaves. A palmetto is a type of palm tree, and obviously a borderless back design. So you get this as the guarantee extra Joker. We have the Joker itself with the 45, little cowboy carrying a rifle of some sort, riding the star. And then Texan 45, International Playing Card Company Limited. And then what I was looking for here, so the way we're going to tell the date, partly those clues that I mentioned on the tuck box, the use of the registered trademark symbol, the presence of a barcode, the use of a blue seal, these are all hints towards date. But the biggest, most helpful thing here is that K5600H. A K code would indicate a date, I think, of 1907, 1928, 1948, 1968, 1988, and 2008. I don't think these are from 2008. They could be. So these, I want to say, well, you know what? They must be from 2008, I'm going to say, because I don't think that registered trademark symbol was being used. So we know that these are not from the 60s or earlier. The barcode didn't even exist then. So all of those early dates are out. So the only possible dates for this would be 1988 or 2008. The 2008 obviously is pre-Black Seal, so Blue Seal works with that. That supports the barcode, that supports the use of the registered trademark symbol. So if these were 1988, I don't believe they would have had that registered trademark symbol on them. So yeah, I think these are probably a 2008 print run. And it's not always an exact science, but there you have it. And we'll do a quick look through. Totally standard faces. These are, yeah, definitely don't feel quite like a current USPC deck, and not in a great way. Ooh, that one is cut kind of off center. You can see sort of the tilt there. And so now, you know what, this is something that I like to talk about. There's sort of like, within the card collecting world, a hype and a legend over Blue Seal decks that they're somehow like all better quality and, you know, better registration, better stock and finish. I don't find that to be the case. If you go on some of like the Magic forums and things and look at posts from 20 plus years ago, you know, well prior to the switch to Erlanger Factory, people were complaining then about registration and handling, and so you see people bemoaning the fall of quality from USPC for literal decades, and it's like, well, it can't have been falling that much for that long a period of time. But with an all-over back, obviously there's no borders here to see like off-centering or anything, but clearly, you know, just looking at the placement of the index here and the index here, that is a little bit of a miscut. The feel of these, I mean, part of this could be, I don't know where these have been, oh yeah, like we have down here as well. So like, look at the difference in that bottom corner between the ace of diamonds and the two of diamonds as far as cut consistency. And this is not to rag on USPC. They make great cards. It's just to sort of point out the truth that cards are cards. They're paper, they're mass-produced, they're intended for gameplay, and there's these minor variants, so yeah, totally standard, typical modern faces throughout. Definitely, these have like a little bit more of a grit to them, I would say. They don't feel gritty, but they're not nearly as glossy or smooth or slippery as you would expect from decks that are being produced today. So these do have certainly a different feel. You know, this is kind of pre-magic finish and all of that. And then we have just two ranking of poker hands, one in English and one in French. That's pretty cool. I've actually never seen those before. So that's pretty neat. The deck itself, though, is, like I said, is fascinating. So let's see here. Yeah, so kind of a very clumpy fan out of the box, but this deck has been sitting around unopened since 2008. I can tell right away that this is a modern cut deck, so my test there is to bevel the cards and to feel this edge and to feel this edge, and you can tell by which is smoother where the blades passed through. So if the blades punch through the faces, going faces to backs, that's what we would call a traditional cut. If the blades pass through the Backs going to the faces, that's what we would call a modern cut, and that's here. I have a smoother edge here, which means that the blade passed going from backs to faces, creating a very like microscopic bevel to the cards. So if you open a deck of cards, give them a little bevel to the side, rub your finger here, rub your finger on the other edge. If the face side one is smoother, it's traditional cut. If the back side is smoother, it is modern cut. Okay, so really cool, pretty back design. I really like this back design quite a bit. As far as thickness, these are, I would say, on the thin side of medium. They feel kind of like a pretty standard, typical classic bike stock thickness, but they bend pretty easily. Like, I'm not using a ton of force to spring the cards here. So decent softness, and yeah, so I would say these are a little softer than what I would expect from a typical out-of-the-box retail bicycle deck being produced today. And hopefully as they break in, they might fan and spread a little better. They definitely are kind of clumpy, and so that's the thing, you know, people very much like to point out USPC registration errors these days. You see that with retail or custom decks, but their stock and finish today is better than ever, and their registration, they've been using the same machines to punch cards for like 100 years, and so the registration issues can exist. Sometimes you get a perfect deck, sometimes you get an imperfect deck, and in my experience, you know, I've been buying cards new at retail for 30-ish years. Sometimes they're perfect, sometimes you have some that are off. That's just kind of the way it goes. And as we see, you know, that can be different even from deck to deck, or rather card to card within the same deck. So the fanning and whatnot, yeah, not very good. But let's see if we can knock out a little Pharaoh shuffle here. Near perfect Pharaoh shuffle, and that's more of that. I just don't think I got I didn't get a perfect 26-26 cut, but all the interweaving actually quite nice. Okay. Yeah, they Pharaoh really nicely, and yeah, that slightly thinner, softer stock is pretty nice. So yeah, if these had a nicer finish or coating on them, they'd be pretty perfect. You know, this is stock-wise a little more similar to the modern thin crushed stocks that USPC's been using the last 5 years or so, or offering rather. So a couple of other cool things that I wanted to mention about this deck. It's best known within the Magic world for edge marking stuff that was published and popularized by Jeff Busby. Jeff was a magician who was born in Canada, who moved to the US as a preteen, but of course throughout his life he went back and revisited Canada and spent time up there, and so as, you know, a standard available brand in Canada, he was using the Palmetto cards, and he discovered that with the cards, so we can see here, if we look at this band of red, down in this lower corner, we see spots of white, whereas up in this corner, we more or less see a solid band. And he talks about in his book, The Secret of the Palmettos, using those as built-in one-way marks. So it's an inconsistency in the design of the deck. There is a readable one-way mark on the actual back here and here. So if we were to reverse one of these cards and spread them out, I think you can all see this sort of bright white spot here that exists in this upper left corner, but not in this corner. So if we're to turn one around, you can see here, this looks quite different in that spot. So they are one ways naturally, just by design on the back. And then with how much the little frond of the palm leaf is near the edge, that's what creates that red band, or the patchy band. And Jeff, in his book, he talks about the consistency of that, you may have a perfectly centered cut deck, in which case you'll have solid red bands, but typically you have a solid band and a broken band. And so he used these as sort of one-way edge mark decks. He also made some important distinctions about edge markings and what he called bevel edge work. So edge work and edge marking on decks has been around for literally hundreds of years. Busby defined an edge mark, a true edge mark, as being applied only to the actual edge of the card, viewable only on the edge, and really indetectable if you were looking at the back. So he preferred the term bevel edge work, which was a mark on the actual back of the card but placed very near the edge that can't be seen when the deck is squared, but with just a small bevel, it can be seen. So very minute and that sort of thing. Busby credits Theodore Deland, the Wonder deck produced around 1915. It was also known as the $4 deck, as the first factory printed edge mark or bevel edge mark deck, even though hand applied work goes back, like I said, hundreds of years. So, yeah, those are the Texans. Oh, and another reason why that's important, I think Edgemark decks over the last 5 years or so have really had kind of a resurgence. For a long time, this was sort of one of the more well-known decks, and Busby's work, if you can get his book, it's called Secret of the Palmettos. It was first published in 1998. People would use the same sort of marks with B decks or any other decks that had an all-over borderless back design. But this one's particularly cool, and just wanted to kind of share some of that info and also open these up and have kind of a blast from the past from a pre-Erlanger USPC deck. So I think that covers more or less everything. Leave a comment down below if you have any other questions or information about the Texan Palmettos, but really cool deck, first introduced in the late 1800s, printed for well over 100 years, an international brand, printed in the United States for the market in Canada. Some really cool built-in elements to the design that can be used for magic tricks. And yeah, I got kind of off on a tangent. I should write scripts when I do these videos. Modern Edgemark decks. So there are several that have come on the market that are factory printed now. I can't name them all. There have been several on Kickstarter. Some of the most notable ones are Andrei Shenichka's Butterfly deck, which first was on Indiegogo in 2016, and so for the past 5-6 years that's gone through several iterations and took some of the work that Busby had published, and Andrei's a genius and took it to a whole new level, but he took some of the kind of thoughts and features of this deck and put it into his Butterfly deck. There are some other great ones out there that you can research. But for me, that's just sort of the fascinating thing. When we hold decks, even this one that was made in the 21st century, we have that history, which is so cool, that a deck design that was created in the late 1800s had work published, about design elements that could be used by magicians in the late 1990s, and then used to create an awesome factory printed deck, the Butterflies, in the 21st century. So we see these steps over time, this growth and change and development, where we all kind of stand on the shoulders of those who came before us. I think it's all just very cool, very fascinating. So if you can get your hands on these, I don't have one of the 2010 decks. I imagine those probably have a nicer finish on them than this deck. And because this is 2008, this may have been printed at a time when they were kind of at the tail end of Cincinnati production and going into Erlanger production. There was sort of a little window of time where the finish was like this. That coating was kind of clumpy, didn't fan so well. So you do see that from some kind of late 2008 and early 2009 decks. So not a huge surprise here. So I would think that other Texans from other print years would handle a little better. I think the stock on these is great. Unfortunately, the coating is not, but that I think was a pretty temporary issue. I remember my own lefty deck. That was the first custom deck that I ever produced. That was run in 2009, and it had similar kind of coating and fanning issues. So that was just sort of a particular period in time where things weren't optimal. But all in all, still a very cool deck. I hope you enjoyed this, found it interesting, useful, entertaining. So yeah, that is a little look at the Texan 45 Palmettos. And yeah, please feel free to leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you. Please give this video a like, and please hit that subscribe button. It really helps out a lot. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time.